This is a full story. Puppy wishes you all a happy and enjoyable story. The person who bullied me at school became my brother. During the day, he shoved me into the restroom at school and humiliated me. At night, in front of our parents, he would ruffle my hair and smile gently. My nightmare extended from school to my home. At 1 a.m., Rockey entered my room, his hands in his pockets. He looked satisfied as he saw me curled up in the corner. Good girl, no locked door tonight. Yesterday, I locked the door to keep him out, so today, he cut the straps of my shoulder bag in the restroom. In the darkness, he leisurely walked toward me. That face, so flawless, smiled in a way that to me was like a demon emerging from an endless abyss. He grabbed my chin and then deftly undid the buttons on the front of my shirt. His hand rested on my collarbone. The unfamiliar warmth from his fingertips made me instinctively shrink back, only to earn a mocking laugh from him. Leaning closer, he whispered into my ear, "Here, on your skin." The foreign heat spread through me in an instant. "How about we tattoo my name?" I pushed him away in terror. Straightening up, he smiled indifferently. "I'm just joking," but every joke Rockey made eventually became reality. His gaze idly drifted to my clothes rack, and he casually pointed to a dress. "Wear this tomorrow." Yes, after Rockey became my stepbrother, he even started controlling what I wore every day. Rockey hated me. I realized this clearly the first time I met him after transferring to a new class. He was the student council president, top 10 in the grade, good-looking, popular, so it was incredibly easy for him to channel his violence onto someone. It started with social exclusion. After people noticed Rockey didn't like me, no one wanted to approach me. Then came the physical bullying. Rockey rarely touched me himself, though, but he had plenty of ways to crush my dignity and ensure I could never lift my head. He chopped off the long hair I'd grown for years, then forced me to look at my own despair in the mirror. He had others use permanent markers to scrawl obscene words on my desk, drawing laughter from the entire class. I was harassed so often that my studies suffered. Then there were groups of people who would loudly announce my test scores every time exams were handed back. So, when I found out the woman my dad was going to marry had a son, and that son was Rockey, I felt like my entire world was collapsing. "From now on, he's your brother." My dad patted his shoulder and pushed him in front of me. Rockey curled his lips into a soft smile. "Rockey is a top student at school," my dad said. "If there's anything you don't understand, just ask him." So, at night, Rockey would tutor me with my homework in my room. Standing behind me, he leaned down on the desk, his fingers grazing the edges of my notebook. Outwardly, he was the caring older brother, helping his sister with her studies. In reality, his knuckles pressed deliberately into my waist. "You can tell Dad everything I do to you, but you should also know what the consequences will be, right?" The next morning, I didn't wear the outfit Rockey had chosen. At the breakfast table, he raised an eyebrow but said nothing. One thing about him, he always maintained the image of a well-behaved, outstanding child in front of our parents. But at the shoe rack, in a corner where no one could see, Rockey kicked my shoe and spoke in a displeased tone. "Didn't I tell you to wear that dress?" I pursed my lips and looked up at him. "Why do you have to do this to me?" We had never even met before. Why was his hatred for me so direct and unfounded? But he didn't bother answering such a question. Instead, he leaned down slightly, looking at me seriously. "Not obedient? You're screwed." I thought that as long as I stayed in class, followed along with the lessons, I could avoid being targeted, but I underestimated their methods. After morning exercises, I returned to the classroom and casually reached into my pencil case for a pen. Instead, I touched something wriggling. Looking inside, I immediately flung the case away. It was filled with caterpillars. Bugs were my worst fear. Just seeing one made my hair stand on end. I instinctively backed away, making a loud noise at the back of the classroom. I was truly, deeply terrified. But my trembling state quickly became a source of laughter for everyone. "Whoa, what did you put in her pencil case? Huang, she's freaking out." Rockey walked in, holding some worksheets, and crouched in front of me. "Aww. She's crying," he murmured, brushing his thumb gently across my cheek. I turned my face away, which clearly displeased him. Gripping my chin, he forced me to look at him. What a coward. That afternoon, those boys kept lingering near my desk, making me nervous they'd pull another stunt with bugs. I spent the whole time lying on my desk, too scared to look up. "Hey," Rockey said as he walked behind me after school. "Mad at us for messing with you? You didn't used to get angry no matter what we did." Toying with a charm on my backpack, he stopped as I turned to face him. "Rockey, do we have some kind of grudge? Why do you do this to me?" The sunset cast a beautiful glow in his eyes. He smiled warmly, gently, as if he truly cared. "You're adorable. A total psychopath. My dad raised me alone, always telling me I was soft-spoken and never shared anything at home. It was true. I had a very tolerant nature. The fact that I survived 2 years of Rocky's bullying without losing my mind proved it. I didn't let them get to me much. But bugs truly disgusted me. So, when I got home, I avoided interacting with Rockey altogether. His good older brother persona cracked a little. I thought he'd blow up, but instead, after his shower, he walked into my room. "Are you seriously mad?" he asked, his tone ambiguous. I stayed focused on solving a problem and ignored him. "Those bugs weren't from me. If I knew you were this afraid of them, I would have found a more exciting way to scare you with them, right?" His words were like whispers from a demon. Yet, he casually ruffled my hair, seemingly in a good mood. "You got question 4 wrong. No wonder you're so dumb." I frowned, scribbling out all the formulas on my paper in frustration. This earned a soft, amused chuckle from him. The next day, the person who put bugs in my pencil case apologized to me in front of everyone. His words were halting, but the bruises on his body were plain to see. I lowered my eyes, focused on solving problems, and didn't spare them another glance. My desk had long been covered with vile words written in indelible ink. What was worse, they gave me the worst desk in the class. The desk wobbled whenever I wrote, and my frustration would often send a loud creak through the air. But then, someone held the desk steady. Rockey crouched in front of me, folding a piece of paper to wedge under the leg of my desk. This person had been acting strange these past few days. Of course, I didn't think he was suddenly showing mercy or going soft on me. I figured he was just building up to something big. Hands in his pockets, he lowered his gaze to me. After a moment, he gave me a casual smile. Today was my birthday. In previous years, it was at least a day I could look forward to. But this year, there was Rockey. In the evening, my family went out to eat. The warmth at the dinner table couldn't make me forget the presence of the person sitting next to me. Under the table, his leg wouldn't stay still. Finally, we got to the part where I blew out the candles on my birthday cake. He playfully reached out and tapped my waist. My dad's gift to me was an e-reader. My mom gave me a necklace. Rockey's gift? A bottle of perfume. The perfume's box felt heavy, but I didn't think much of it at first. I never wanted to take a second look at anything he gave me. I threw it into a corner as soon as I got home. Until midnight, he opened my door. This man sneaking into my room had become second nature. I frowned at his smiling face. "Aren't you going to check out the gift I gave you?" He leaned lazily against the door, asking nonchalantly. I had already opened it at the restaurant. As if he guessed my confusion, he added with a smile, "There's another layer. Rockey always knew how to humiliate me. The birthday gift from my dear brother. The first layer was a bottle of perfume. The second, a dog collar." I glared at him while he smiled, easygoing as ever. "Custom ordered 3 months in advance. Don't like it?" He strolled over, took the collar out of the box, and measured it against my neck. The leather brushed against my skin. He tilted his head, his smile one of satisfaction. "It really suits you." I shoved him away. I knew that Rockey loved to see me like this. Humiliated, furious, and powerless against him. The more miserable I felt, the more exhilarated he became. When the results of the latest exam came back, I stared at my abysmal score. It seemed I was born with a mental block against numbers. Subjects like math and physics were always particularly difficult for me. The paper had already been passed around the class. By the time it reached me, it was crumpled and wrinkled. After class, the teacher called me to her office. Someone else was there, too. If I was reliably second to last, this person was firmly in last place. I had barely seen him this semester because he always curled up in the corner. "You two are the worst in math in our class," the teacher said, her sharp gaze piercing us through her glasses. "I've arranged for someone to tutor you. Study hard. You'll form a study group of 3. If you have questions, ask Rockey. Got it?" Rockey. One day, the ringleader of school bullies had become a study assistant. I watched the teacher pat his shoulder with high expectations as he walked into the office. He smiled at me. I could already imagine what kind of a study group this would be. The start of another nightmare. The setting sun streamed through the classroom windows. Rockey sat on the desk in front of me. "What the hell? Are you seriously tutoring these 2 idiots?" His friend teased him from behind. The boy who had been trembling in the corner was named Peter. He seemed to be a longtime victim of bullying and genuinely wasn't very bright. "Here, look at the first question." Rockey feigned seriousness, holding up my test paper, but my attention was on Peter, who was shaking so much that his desk wobbled. "Hey." When I came to, Rockey's leg was already kicking my desk. His long legs stretched out as he stood, hands in his pockets, looking down at me. "Are you looking at me or at him?" I stared back at him for a moment. He was the first to smile. "You got 21 and he got 12. Perfect match." Perhaps Rockey's stellar grades triggered my dad. When he saw my test paper, he scolded me harshly. "You won gold medals in math competitions in elementary and middle school. Don't you remember? How did you end up like this?" There were still certificates from those days hanging on my wall. But now, numbers only gave me headaches. I stared at today's math test. I could feel how much harder it was for me to learn math compared to others. I couldn't even use formulas properly, because my dad insisted that Rockey tutor me. He now had a legitimate reason to enter my room. He leaned against my desk. Just when I thought he was going to mock me, he said softly, "If you don't understand something, just ask me." I thought the sun had risen in the west. But then his mom walked in with a plate of fruit. "It's so nice to see you two getting along." I'm relieved. Rockey's mom was the epitome of grace and kindness. She had always been good to me. She had mentioned once that Rockey used to have a younger sister. But something happened. She passed away. Since then, his mom had been worried that Rockey and I didn't get along. "Well, study hard together, okay? Rockey, help your sister out." The moment his mom left, Rockey dropped his act. He leaned slightly forward, standing behind me, and lazily pinched my earlobe. "Peter," he murmured, the name of the boy who had been trembling all afternoon. "Go seduce him. How about that?" I couldn't fathom his thought process or why he did the things he did. The word "no" hadn't left my lips before he grabbed my jaw. He narrowed his eyes, his knuckles brushing against my chin playfully. "If you refuse, I'll post the photos I took of you on the school forum." He meant the ones he took after cutting my strap in the restroom. I shoved him. "Do whatever you want. I don't care how others see me." And Rockey didn't actually post my photos on the forum, but it's clear he's not the type to let things go so easily. Rumors began to spread in the class that Peter and I were together. Then one morning, on the blackboard in the classroom, someone had drawn our names in large letters with a heart in between. The drawing sparked laughter from everyone. "Those two, together? What is this? A comedy skit? Middle school romance? Really?" My name became deliberately tied to Peter's. When the teacher called on me to answer a question, someone below would shout Peter's name. During exercises, they pushed me to stand next to him. "Did you know? He seems to have fallen for you." That evening, Rockey walked into my room and crouched beside my bed. "I saw him looking at you today." His ears were red, but he probably doesn't know. His hand rested on my neck, gradually tightening. "The girl he likes looks like this in front of me, right?" I stared at him, unmoving. After a while, his fingers brushed lightly over my neck. Rockey always smiled so gently, but the words he spoke never matched his expression. "Haley, do you even realize? You'd look so damn good wearing a collar." Through Peter, someone unrelated to me. He trampled my dignity and shattered it into pieces. I used to think, if I was already in hell, at least I wouldn't drag someone innocent down with me. But it was too late. The next day, when someone cornered me against the wall and emptied the contents of my bag onto me, Peter suddenly rushed in and pulled me out. This was their usual tactic to humiliate me, accuse me of stealing money and dump my belongings everywhere. No one expected timid, fearful Peter to come to my rescue. Behind us, whistles echoed. Peter dragged me along, running as though he didn't know where to go. I stared at the back of his head. His hair seemed to have grown out. He stumbled, nearly causing me to fall with him. His glasses fell to the ground. I bent down to pick them up and unexpectedly met his eyes. He always hid behind heavy bangs, so it was the first time I'd seen his face clearly. How should I put this? I had never seen such beautiful eyes. A pale gray, faintly translucent under the light, yet utterly hollow within. Stunning enough to make breathing momentarily cease. I hesitated before speaking softly. "You shouldn't have pulled me away." I wasn't sure if he understood. He only pressed his lips together in silence. When we returned to class, the room erupted with teasing laughter. But Peter started being kinder to me. It was as if he didn't understand the malice behind everyone's ridicule. He brought me breakfast, and secretly left candies in my drawer. Every time he did something like that, every time he looked at me with those innocent eyes, the guilt in me grew heavier. Rockey's goal had been achieved. No matter how hard I struggled, he always found a way to get what he wanted. Now, he delighted in creating an illusion of happiness, only to destroy it with his own hands. My parents had to go on a business trip for a week, leaving just Rockey and me alone in the house for 7 days. When I heard the news, I instinctively shivered. Rockey sat beside me, smiling faintly. On the first night after they left, he blocked my doorway with swaggering confidence. The house was eerily quiet, stirring a faint sense of fear within me. He leaned against the doorframe, tilting his head to look at me. Do you know why those guys haven't been messing with you lately? It's because Peter's been taking all the hits for you. If the devil in my world had a face, it would undoubtedly be Rocky's. What a shame you didn't see him getting kicked to the wall. Just come at me instead. I grabbed his collar angrily, but he simply covered my trembling fingers with his hand. Noticing the way my hands shook under his grip, he let out a quiet laugh. Don't tell me you've fallen for him too? I glared at him, my teeth nearly grinding to dust. Rocky, why do you have to do this to me? He stepped closer with every word I spoke, forcing me to retreat until my back hit the wall. Then why don't you fight back? His grip tightened around my wrist, his words digging into my soul like the questions of a devil. Why didn't I fight back? Deep down, I always knew the answer. Just as the realization dawned on me, Rocky's hand ruffled my hair. He leaned in slightly, studying me with an unnervingly innocent smile. Sleep with me tonight, and I'll leave Peter alone, okay? Rocky kept testing my limits, and in the end, he was surprised to discover I didn't have any. Rocky's bed was larger than mine, so when he held me while lying there, it didn't feel cramped. When he said sleep, he really meant sleep. You said you'd keep your word. Don't mess with Peter. I stared at the empty floor as I spoke. Moonlight falling through the window cracks, fragmented and tormenting. He was behind me, the closest I'd ever been to him. I felt his fingers brush my shoulder blades before he laughed softly, pulling me tighter into his arms. Why are you so kind to him? He waited for a long time, but I never gave him an answer. Realizing I wouldn't respond, he brushed my hair aside and sighed against my neck. The words were faint, like a whisper lost in shallow breaths. Honestly, I'm a little jealous of him. At least, Rocky was someone who kept his promises. No matter how twisted he was, even if he clung to his sister to sleep, he never touched Peter again. And even the bullying at school subsided. Late at night, I listened to his quiet breathing, gently moving his arm aside. I tiptoed out of bed and carefully opened the drawers by my desk. I needed to confirm something. So for the past few nights, I'd been searching for one specific item. I believed he would have kept it somewhere in his room. Finally, in the deepest part of the third shelf, I found a small box with a combination lock. A wooden box, seemingly old. I tried several number combinations, but none worked. Frowning, I considered sneaking it out and prying it open. Behind me, a calm voice broke the silence. The code is 0604. Her birthday. Rocky stood behind me, watching quietly. When he didn't smile, his face looked cold and serious. Moonlight poured into his eyes, delicate and devoid of emotion. I lowered my head, unlocking the box. Inside were small trinkets whose meaning I didn't explore, until I found a photograph. Just as I thought, back then, Rocky's sister. It was my fault she died. I always forget when I started becoming weak and passive, accepting things as they come. I used to laugh so boldly in the photos. Before high school, the entire wall at home was filled with my awards. When I was little, I didn't understand what failure meant. Because, with numbers and math, I seemed to have some talent. While my peers were showing off their ability to memorize the times tables, I was already exploring more profound knowledge with adult books. Every exam that was difficult for other kids, I handled with ease. No matter how hard the questions were, I seemed to be able to solve them. And with this talent, I kept winning various awards since elementary school. I was soon labeled as a genius, and countless praises made me incredibly confident. I had never failed, and I couldn't understand why other kids my age couldn't even understand simple questions. During a training camp outside the province, I met Serena. She was a little girl from the same dormitory, and we quickly became friends. I noticed her because, on the first day of the training camp, she cried. I handed her a napkin, and we became friends. Her grades were in the middle to lower range, but she was very competitive. I often saw her studying late at night when I climbed into bed. The pressure of the competition training camp was immense, because everyone around me was among the best in their age group. But for me, staying first was too easy. Even the principal at the time praised me, saying she had never seen such a talented student. Then something happened, and Serena and I fell out. Looking back, it was just a trivial disagreement in our friendship. But at that time, we both genuinely didn't want to interact with each other anymore. At that age, I didn't know the influence I had. I was good at studying, ranked first, and teachers supported me while classmates protected me. When they saw I wasn't talking to Serena anymore, a group of people began to exclude her. I never cared about the impact I had on Serena. I was indulging in the thrill of leveling up like in a game. I didn't even notice when she started becoming gloomy and silent. Maybe it was that day. In every exam of the training camp, I kept getting first place, while Serena, who had once been good at studying, fell to second last. When I received the paper, she turned and shoved me hard. I was confused by the push. After all, we used to be really good friends. Are you blaming me for your decline? If you got such simple questions wrong, it's your own fault. Why push me? Of course, I wasn't having it, and I loudly retorted behind her. She didn't respond, but several classmates, who were close to me, started defending me behind my back. After that, Serena spoke even less, and each time she looked at me, it was with a strange gaze. Until one day, she called me and asked me to meet her at the bottom of a building. I thought she wanted to reconcile, so I went without thinking. I remember the cold frost of November hanging on the branches, the day before our national competition. When I arrived at the location, I didn't see anyone. 2 minutes later, she sent me another text. Next life, can I be as smart as you? Looking back, no matter how big the disaster, it always starts from a small spark. The seeds of evil also take root and grow from a single word. Serena jumped off the building in front of me. Do you know what it's like to watch someone fall from the 11th floor? Their face smashed beyond recognition, their body twisted out of shape. When you look at their distorted form, and their protruding eyes seem to be staring right at you, how deeply will your soul be shaken? I couldn't eat any solid food for a month. I couldn't look at anything related to numbers anymore. For a long time, whenever I closed my eyes, it was that bloodied, disfigured face. My brain couldn't process anything. Every time I saw numbers, my hands would tremble. Eventually, it became a survival mechanism to erase that brutal memory. But deep down, I always knew I had to atone. If I had noticed earlier that something was wrong with Serena, if I hadn't lashed out at her that day, if I hadn't let her be excluded, would she have even gone up to that building? It's all my fault. Someone like me doesn't deserve to struggle, no matter what happens. If someone wants to bring disaster upon me, I'll face it, carrying the weight of a life I have no right to resist. My hand trembled as I held the photo. After a long while, I reached out with my other hand, desperately trying to hold it down. Countless memories came rushing back as if I was back to that day, staring at that horrifying face. After Serena died in front of me, my first instinct was to run away. I buried that memory deep in my heart, thinking no one would ever find out. But in the end, Rockey did. Do whatever you want to me, because no matter the result, I can accept it. You, a person like you, deserve to go to hell, right? The person in front of me stood there, bent down, still smiling with a gentle warmth. He raised his hand and gently rubbed my head. It was only then that I suddenly snapped awake, feeling the warmth. I forgot that he was a bad person. A very, very bad person. He tilted his head, smiling maliciously. I'm not bullying you because of my sister. It's just because you're fun. But he stopped smiling, a serious glint flashing in his eyes. What should I do with you? Rockey seemed to have changed. This afternoon, when those people threw paper balls at me, using me as a target, I didn't move. But Rockey became very angry. He started forbidding others to gossip about me. Couldn't stand me interacting with any boys. Everyone felt his change, but it seemed like he himself didn't notice. Several schoolgirls in our class liked Rockey. During morning exercises, they pulled me to the back of the line, while Rockey, the good student, was giving a speech. Behind the school playground, there was a small corner, full of weeds. The broadcast was loud, and they dragged me inside. The leading girl slapped me hard across the face. You seductress, how did you lure Rockey? Can't you just be a good dog? As they cursed me, scenes from the past kept flashing in my mind. How, as a young girl, I had gathered my friends to exclude Serena. Was she in that much pain back then? I could never get her forgiveness. Someone picked up an abandoned drink bottle from the ground and hit me hard on the head with it. It was such a small bottle, but it hit the raised corner of my head, and the pain was excruciating. Tisk, what's with that expression? Do you look down on us? The intense pain made me instinctively cover my forehead, but maybe I was too passive, which irritated one of them. Hey, Lugia, should we use this? One girl picked up a piece of scrap steel pipe from the ground, weighing it, her eyes glaring at me. She needs to be taught a lesson. At that moment, I still wondered, did they really know that they were dealing with a life? A heavy, blunt pain hit me, and my head numbed with the impact. 1, 2, hey, she's bleeding. Someone's voice sounded clearly panicked. I didn't know when I started losing vision, stumbling as I stood, and a shadow suddenly fell from above. The expected pain didn't come. Instead, I heard a muffled grunt in my ear. Peter was holding his right arm, having taken the blow himself. He looked down, his thick hair falling over his eyes. From behind, the grade director yelled, "Hey, what are you doing?" My homeroom teacher came running, and many classmates gathered around to watch. While those girls seemed to wake up, dropping the tools in their hands, I shook my head, my vision clouded in a dark red haze. It was really a lot of blood. "Why don't you fight back?" I felt someone catch me, and blood slid down my cheek, staining his school uniform. It was Rockey. His movements weren't gentle. In fact, he seemed a bit frantic. "Why aren't you resisting? Are you just going to stand there and take their blows?" My vision swayed as I looked at him, and suddenly I smiled. "What is it?" "You're the one who taught me not to resist, Rockey. You've been bullying me all along, and that's why they started attacking me. It was all you who set the example. First, I went to the school infirmary. Then I was transferred to the hospital. My parents almost burst into the room, looking at my injuries and then questioning the school teachers. Why they didn't manage the school better. Of course, there was a huge uproar, and the parents of the girls were also called in. Eventually, the medical staff had to kick them out, asking everyone to stop the loud arguments. In the hospital room, it was just me and Rockey. The soft sunlight outside the window poured into the room, slightly blocked by the bright blue bed curtain. His voice was quiet. "Perhaps not meant for me. What should I do with you?" Rocky's strange change in behavior these days gave me a bad feeling. Looking back, it seemed like his gaze toward me had changed. At some point without me noticing, I hated being looked at by him, like I belonged to him. So for the next few days, while recovering, I tried to avoid him. On the other hand, Peter, who had taken the blow for me, seemed to be injured pretty badly. He hadn't come to school for several days. When he appeared again, he was still hiding in the corner. Actually, I wanted to thank him. After all, he got hurt because of me. But I knew that if I got too close, I would drag him back into this mess. So I waited for a moment when everyone was at PE, slipped into the classroom, and put a box of cookies in his desk. But to my surprise, he was right at the back of the class, not attending the lesson. He seemed to be asleep. Actually, from behind. His figure didn't seem weak at all, but he always had such a submissive expression that many classmates kept their distance from him. His hair seemed soft, probably cut shorter since he'd taken a leave from school. For some strange reason, I placed the cookies at the corner of his desk and reached out to touch his hair, but before I could, someone suddenly grabbed my wrist. He wasn't wearing glasses, and the dangerous, aggressive look in his eyes froze me in place. When he realized it was me, he released my wrist. Looking down, he put on his glasses. "What's up?" His voice was clear, something I hadn't noticed before. I pointed at the cookies on his desk. Thanks for taking the blow for me the other day." He stared at the cookies, but didn't respond. To be honest, his look just now had scared me a bit. This wasn't the time to linger, so I waved at him and said, "Goodbye," ready to leave. But I heard him sigh behind me. Even with glasses on, he suddenly seemed to lose that naive air, standing with his hands in his pockets, staring directly at me. "Be careful, Rockey." After giving me that warning, he lay back down on the desk to sleep. "Be careful, Rockey." I certainly knew, but he's my brother. Out of sight, never out of mind. These past few days, even our parents have noticed that I'm avoiding Rockey. "Haley, did you and your brother have a fight?" After dinner, his mom pulled me aside and whispered to me, "If your brother is bullying you, you must tell me." I nodded and replied, "Okay. This is actually the reason I don't want to let my family know the truth about me and Rockey. His mom is so nice to me, and at least on the surface, our family seems to be harmonious. Once I get into college, I can live in a different city from Rockey. At that point, I can completely escape from him. I used to struggle with science-related subjects, but now, perhaps because my memory has returned, I've made some progress. Because of Rockey, the bullying from my classmates stopped. On the other hand, I'm really curious about Peter. He still lingers around like a lost soul in class, with all his grades improving. But the way he warned me and looked at me that day wasn't the same as before. Could it be that he's been pretending to be dumb? I'm not the type to pry into others' business, so my curiosity ends there. I didn't get involved in his life anymore. But one day, while passing through the school corridor, I happened to see him being pushed around by a few senior students. That day was when he took a hit for me, so I couldn't just stand by and do nothing. I immediately thought about running back to find a teacher, but as I turned, I bumped into another student keeping watch. "Little freshman, where are you going?" Crap. I was forced into a corner, and a few people surrounded me in an instant. "Hey, not bad looking." They tugged at my school uniform. "Want to hang out with us?" These people seemed to have no hope of getting into college and didn't care about dropping out. My gaze unconsciously shifted, and I saw Peter behind them. He had stood up. He probably wanted to secretly slip away and report to the teacher, but one of them noticed him. I never expected that before he could say anything, Peter directly punched the guy holding my collar in the back of the head. This immediately angered the group. I thought I was about to witness another bloody and cruel bullying incident. But instead, Peter kicked one of the guys off his arm. The scream echoed in the corner they had chosen, away from prying eyes. The sound of bones cracking and fists hitting flesh left me stunned as I watched the usually timid boy in class knock the seniors to the ground, unable to get up. Amidst the cries of pain, Peter gave one final kick. He frowned and adjusted his glasses, looking at me with a helpless gaze. Looks like I should have gone to the teacher's office to report it. I think I've discovered something incredible. Peter packed up his bag and walked home with me. On the way, when I looked at him for the 13th time, he finally met my gaze. If you want to ask me anything, I'm not going to tell you. I shrugged and looked at the rows of buildings in the sunset. All right, everyone has secrets. But he didn't want to tell me, yet he started probing into my secrets. Why don't you stay away from Rockey? Your parents love you, and reporting to the teacher would be a good option. Peter is a clear-headed and quiet stranger. Maybe because we've had similar experiences, I couldn't help but confide in him. In the following days, after school, I walked with him. Most of the time, it was me talking, and maybe because I was so sincere, I managed to get some information about him. His family is very wealthy. The reason he pretended to be dumb seems to be related to his family. That day, he walked me to my building. I suddenly stopped. With his school bag on his back, staring directly at me was Rockey, whom I had been avoiding these past few days. He raised an eyebrow, and immediately, Peter became that timid person again. Thank you so much for looking after my sister these past few days. Peter flinched. Rockey grabbed my wrist and pulled me towards the house. Wait. I struggled, but his grip wouldn't let go. In a panic, I looked back at the person we left behind. Peter didn't approach. He frowned, watching us. There was no one at home. Rockey pushed me forcefully into the hallway. Let go, you. He did release my wrist, but then he grabbed my chin and pinned me to the sofa. The person in front of me was sinister, his movements rough. Not going to repent, Haley? Why are you struggling? He loosened his collar and looked down at me. After a while, he scoffed. What? You've been avoiding me these days to date a little boy? What's the point of being with a fool? Why not be with me? I couldn't believe those words came from Rockey. Then, I realized he was serious. I'm your sister, you. What sister? Did you ever treat me like a brother, or did I ever treat you like a sister? His gaze fell on me, more exposed than ever. I panicked. Rockey, wake up, you're not. He twisted my chin and kissed me lightly. I kicked him and slapped him hard. He was slapped so hard that his face turned to the side. Then he chuckled. Stop acting like a beast, Rockey. He pushed his tongue against his cheek and squinted at me. A beast? Maybe being seduced by a beast is your fate? After all, you have an evil soul. You're just like me, an abuser. We're both disgusting, aren't we? A girl's strength is no match for a young man. Ignoring my struggles, he stripped off my coat, and I suddenly realized what he was going to do. The exposed skin on my body made me shiver, his hand's temperature passing through me. Just as he removed the last piece of cloth from me, sirens rang out. The door was slammed open. 2 or 3 police officers rushed in, and Rockey casually threw a blanket from the sofa over me, looking down. The boy glanced at me over his shoulder, then turned away. The moment Rockey pulled me into the house, I knew something was wrong. I had Peter report it to the police. I thought no matter what, Rockey's mother would still favor her own son. But the first thing the woman did when she barged into the room was slap Rockey hard across the face twice. Then my father rushed over and kicked him a few times. Are you out of your mind? She's your sister. You. I always thought you were clear-headed. How could you do something like this? My dad's voice was trembling, his hands shaking. Rockey wobbled to his feet, spat out the blood from his lips, and sneered. She's not even my real sister. She is your real sister. When those words were spoken, I thought I must have heard wrong. My eyes widened. Rockey froze in place. The woman's voice trembled, but she spoke clearly. Serena is the child that your dad and I had. You're actually my child with BAME. And me, I had never seen my biological mother since birth. If this woman in front of me is my real mother, then I'm truly Rockey's full-blooded sister. No wonder. I'm Haley, and he's Rockey. It felt like everything had stopped. For a long time, I couldn't hear a single sound. Until Rockey's laughter slowly echoed in the room. He laughed so hard that tears came out. He must be losing his mind. I stood there, frozen, unable to react. Was this a twisted fate left by the previous generation? I don't know, but the person in front of me, he's my real brother. How much wrong has my real brother done to me? The last leaf of autumn fell, and the cold air swept across the city. All I knew was that I never wanted to stay in the same space as this person again. Every time I saw him, I almost threw up. Later, my family separated. It was inevitable. How could Rocky and I still be together? I lived with my dad, and he lived with his mom. Now, I guess that woman was my mom. Then, on an incredibly cold night, his mom suddenly called us to say that Rocky was missing. He went to school and never came back. His phone was unreachable, and no one could find him. But Rocky was my dad's biological son, so of course, my dad went out to search for him overnight. I sat on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. Rocky had disappeared like he had vanished into thin air, and no one could find him. Later, they called the police, and my parents handed out flyers every day looking for him. I still went to school, but that spot in the classroom became empty. It was Peter. My relationship with him had grown better. I probably really needed someone to talk to. He was quiet, not fond of talking. I had cried many times in front of him, and each time, he silently handed me tissues. I told him that I was also an abuser, and recently, I found out that the girl I hurt was my half-sister. He told me that if I didn't die, I should live well. Then, 3 months later, Rocky was found. No one knew what he had gone through before being found. His clothes were torn, and he was so thin that he didn't look like the person he used to be. He had wounds all over, several of his fingers were crushed, and his knees were worn down. He was kneeling on the ground, gritting his teeth. It seemed like the people he had bullied back in middle school had come to take their revenge on him. My mom cried as she held him, and I just watched from a distance. Rocky dropped out of school. I didn't dare to approach him, so our family separated again. I heard he went crazy trying to see me, and then my dad beat him up. The last thing I knew about him was that he started going to hospitals frequently, because he contracted an illness that couldn't be cured. But no one could figure out who had made him this way. As for me, I received an anonymous email. Rocky was lured away to find you. I heard he bullied you at school, so I guess I've avenged you. A few times, I couldn't avoid seeing him. The way he looked at me was intense. The emotions in his eyes were so complicated that I was always scared. Rocky and I could never go back to where we started. He knew it. He would spend the rest of his life in regret. I got into college. Gradually, I moved away from that house and would never see Rocky again. But no matter where I went, I kept in touch with Peter. It was strange. Even though we were so far apart, I could always talk to him about things. Peter would accompany me to Serena's grave. To be honest, even now, I can't face her photo properly. Sometimes, he would fly across several cities just to see me. We'd meet and just have a meal like friends. His family seemed to be quite turbulent. Unlike mine, he had to fight for family assets and constantly watch out for threats from his siblings. Later, I started working. Every month, I donated money in Serena's name to a Hope Elementary School. Later, I donated enough to build them a building. I also participated in anti-bullying activities regularly, wondering if it could comfort Serena's spirit in heaven. But some things, once done, can't be undone. Recently, you don't seem very happy, he said. In the hot pot restaurant, the man sat across from me, steam covering half of his face. Unlike back in school when his hair covered his eyes, he now looked much more capable. His features were actually quite handsome. Now, when he showed them off confidently, he attracted quite a bit of attention from the opposite sex. I nodded. Work was stressful, and the past always flashed in my mind. Then eat more, he said. A piece of beef appeared in my bowl. I stared at it and suddenly laughed at him. Should I call you a boss, Peter, now? You're impressive. He must have returned to the family feud, and his performance was good enough that he didn't need to hide anymore. I saw his image at the company's annual meeting. The man across from me surrendered with both hands. Spare me, I don't want to talk about company stuff while having dinner with you. I laughed, and the hot pot restaurant was filled with a warm atmosphere. After dinner, I stomped my feet in the snow. It's cold, I said. The man beside me looked down at me, then took off his scarf and wrapped it around my neck. Wow, this is so embarrassing, I said, then buried my face in his scarf. Stop it, he snorted, brushing the snow off my head. Across the street, it seemed like someone was watching us. Those were eyes full of despair and misery. I didn't pay attention, but Peter blocked his view. After the holidays, let's donate a library to Serena's school. That school seems well prepared. You're thoughtful. I know. The sins on me can never be washed away. If I can't atone with my death, at least I don't want this to happen again to other young lives. The cold winter wind seemed to grow stronger. The bustling crowd prepared for the coming of the new season. Suddenly, the pine snow fell. I don't know whose autumn it took away. The end. If you like Puppy's story, please follow and like it. Updated every morning at 9 a.m.